An emperor who cut off his hand to change his destiny, three sisters who deceived the world, and a biblical prophet whose fate was decided by a game of chance. This is the dark and disturbing occultism iceberg I have created entirely on my own. We will begin with the strange and move toward some of the most unsettling and sinister events in the history of the occult. Let's start at the tip of the iceberg. Level 1. Dilemma. Among the most successful mediums of the 19th century were the three Fox sisters, who rose to fame after claiming a spirit was communicating with them in their home by knocking on the walls. For 40 years, they dominated the world of mediumship, demonstrating their powers before crowds across the country. But the bubble burst when one of the sisters accepted a $500 check in exchange for confessing that the whole thing had been a hoax. They had made it all up. Nevertheless, the wave of spiritualism did not stop, and today that part of their history is rarely mentioned, almost as if it never happened. Palm reading simply involves discovering a person's destiny through the lines and shape of their hands. This practice originated in India, where it is believed that every aspect, from the hand's shape to the lines, predicts significant moments in a person's life. It might sound a bit fanatical, but the first emperor of France, Napoleon Bonaparte, was a firm believer in this form of divination. Legend has it that during a reading, a palmist noticed Napoleon's fate line was missing and predicted that the emperor would suffer misfortune, failure, and bad luck. What did Napoleon do? He immediately drew his sword and slashed his palm to create his own fate line. Today, Napoleon is considered one of history's greatest military commanders. Now, we aren't saying everyone should go around cutting their palms, but it worked for him. However, if Amityville were relaxing after a long day at work when Ronald D. Ugly 23-year-old burst in screaming, they have that music. Ronald's entire family helps me. There were 6 people, 2 sisters, 2 brothers, father and mother lay face down. Down in their swims for shots. It was like if a supernatural force had kept the gun silent so that none of them would wake up until it was too late with a murderer in freedom. Ronald was taken into custody. Protective, but then a twist occurred. In the plot, it turned out that he was the killer. Told them that some voices in the home they had forced him to family, but no one understood how he had done it all. He alone had finally found himself guilty and sentenced to life in prison. However, as Ronald began his life behind bars, George and Kathleen Lots were doing their business. Life. They bought the house, fully furnished at a price incredibly low, I can't imagine why, and they moved with their 3 children. Although 3 weeks later they would come out, running from the house screaming that he was haunted. It all started with strangers, odors and gelatinous substances that they began to come out of the carpet and the door locks. Then main door started to close violently in the middle of the night. George once saw Kathleen levitate, while his face transformed into of an old woman with scratches all over her body. Then children's beds. They also began to move towards. All this paranormal activity began at 3:15 in the morning, the same time Ronald had started killing his family. He had actually been summoned by the occult to kill his family, and the same demon was now staying in the house to bring the same fate to the Lutz family. And cyanide to kill 7 men, but Rasputin consumed it all and remained standing. Then he was shot in the back. But not only did the mad monk not fall, he actually chased his attackers. Finally, another shot would finish off Rasputin. 3 days later, his body was recovered from the Neva River, but that is not the end of the story. Days later, Rasputin's secretary published a letter in which Rasputin predicted that if he were killed by a nobleman, the Russian aristocracy would fall. 2 short months later, Nicholas abdicated the throne in March 1917, and he and his family were executed, bringing an end to the Russian monarchy. The West Memphis 3. The 1980s were a terrible time to be a Satanist in the United States. Satanic panic was gripping the nation, and when a particularly horrific event occurred in West Memphis, Arkansas, 3 teenagers ended up behind bars. On the afternoon of May 5, 1993, 3 8-year-old boys were playing together in the neighborhood. But when the stepfather of one of them, John Mark Byers, called for them to come home, the boys never appeared. They were never seen alive again. Police found their bodies in the woods near a drainage ditch. They were naked and bound. One of the boys in particular, Christopher Byers, had suffered much more severe injuries. He had multiple lacerations on his body and had been. There were many suspects. Christopher's stepfather, who possessed a bloodied knife that quickly disappeared, a middle-aged man covered in mud and blood who showed up at a restaurant. But upon seeing the scene, they were certain it was the work of a satanic cult, and they adopted that theory. An officer immediately named 18-year-old Damien Eccles as the killer. Damien was a misfit who studied Wicca. He used to wear black, read horror novels, and listen to heavy metal. He denied having anything to do with it, so the police pressured his friends. One of them was 17-year-old Jesse Miskelly Jr. Jesse had the mental age of a second grader, but the police didn't let that stop them. They interrogated him. For 12 hours, finally, Jesse confessed that he and Damon had committed acts together with 16-year-old Jason Baldwin. The 3 were arrested, and their trial was based on the idea that the Assos were from a cult character and that children were Satanists. It turned out that it was enough for them to be declared guilty. Damien was sentenced to death, Jason to life in prison, and Jesse to life sentence plus 40 years. The case. Nazi occultism. The Nazi army's fascination with the occult was legendary. It was present in their ideologies, their propaganda, and their symbols. Every part of the Nazi military was deeply connected to the occult. How did a political party become so immersed in the occult? And why were the Nazis a political party? In Germany, before the regime that rose to power under Adolf Hitler in 1933, and long before the destruction of 11 million lives, many army leaders belonged to the Thule Society. This was a mysterious occult group dedicated to studying the mythological origins of the superior Aryan race. Upon coming to power, they set about spreading propaganda rooted in these occult beliefs, telling Germans they were the pure race and must protect their lineage from non-Aryans. They seized control of every aspect of government, from schools and music to books. Gradually, the Nazi Party manipulated and radicalized baseless beliefs to stoke hatred, prompting many young people to enlist in order to protect their pedigree. The Nazi military also began secretly creating its own pure Aryan race. Young, blue-eyed blonde women were encouraged to report to centers to bear children with other, pure Nazi officers, and the resulting babies were taken away to be raised by the SS. They even abducted children with blonde hair and blue eyes from the countries they occupied. The children were forced to reject their origins and accept Nazi teachings. However, the majority of them ended up in the gas chambers.